Hi guys, this is John Anderson with Ragdoll Studios. You can find us at www.ragdollanimation.com. Today I'll be showing you how to use a simple particle flow in order to fire arrows at a target, have them stick to the target, and then wobble from the force of the impact and stick to the ground and maybe bounce off this brick wall. Um, so we're not going to be modeling anything. I'll try to provide all of these files to you, but in the event that you're unable to get this file, it's not terribly difficult to model this stuff. So we won't be going over the modeling. All right, so to start, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add some animation to our arrow. So I'm going to go into my left view by hitting L on the keyboard. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bend modifier to my arrow. And then I'm just going to give it a bend to see which direction it's going. And you can see it's bending backward. So I want it to bend up and down. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and change this to -90. And now we can see that it's bending up, which is what we want. But it's bending a little too much. I mean, we could go and exaggerate it like this if we wanted, but I'm going to go with a little less of a bend. So let's start with, well, actually, first we have to start with 0. We have to hit auto key, and then we'll move over to frame 5. And this is where we're going to add our first bend. So at 0, it's flat. At 5, it starts to bend. So we're going to do, let's try 25 and see how that works. That's not too bad. Alright, so then I'm going to go 5 frames further, and I'll do the opposite. So it'll be -25, but because I want the bend to decrease every time it kind of recoils, I'll do a -20. And then I'll go not quite 5 frames, let's do 3 more frames. And for this one, I'm going to decrease it even more. So let's do 15. Okay. And then we'll go 3 frames more. So frame 16, and I'll do -10. So we're steadily decreasing the amount of bend that this has each time. I don't want to do 3 frames. I want it to kind of shorten shorten in these last couple of bends. So I'm just going to go 2 frames to frame 18. And I'm gonna do an angle of 3, and then I'll go 2 frames further and I'll do an angle of -1, and then I'll go 1 more frame and let's do back to 0. So what you're gonna have is this kind of motion right here. Now notice though that the tip is bending, so what that means is we have to limit the effect of the bend. So I'm going to go to frame 5. I'm going to turn off auto key because we want to make sure we don't animate this parameter. And I'm going to click limit effect in the modify panel, and then I'm going to drag that upper limit until it gets to the back of the arrow. You can see that line that's shifting backward. We want that to be at the very back of the arrow. Okay. And now when I play this, you'll notice that the tip isn't bending at all. Alright, so one other thing that we need to know is the pivot point of the arrow is going to determine how deep that arrowhead is embedded into the target. So right now I have it right about there. I can shift that just a little bit if I want that to be a little less. So let's put it right there, and we'll call that good. Okay, so what I want to do now is drag out a particle flow. So I'm going to go into my top view, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my create panel, particle systems, PF source, and I'm just going to create a particle system that's about the same width as the grass there. So that ends up being about 65 by 65. So let's do something like that. Go to my left view, and you can see that there's an arrow on this gizmo, on this emitter or this icon. So that tells you that this emitter is directional. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and rotate this, and that's going to be the direction our arrows fire from. And then I'm going to go ahead and zoom out and bring this emitter, the PF source icon, back quite a ways. Alright, so that's good. Now if we scrub through the timeline, we can see that we have some particles emitting. I don't think this is going to be quite long enough. Let's just change the timeline to 200 frames end time. Hit OK. I think that's going to be fine. So if I play this, and I think these arrows are a little slow, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and open up my particle view, drag this over where you can see it, and I'm just going to speed it up by selecting speed, and I'll go ahead and change this to say 250 and see how that is. Much better. Alright, so we're going to do a little back and forth balance work here to get the arc of these arrows to come down where we want them on the target. But in order to create that arc, we're going to need a gravity. So I'll go to the Create panel, and then to Space Warps, I will select Forces in the drop-down list, and I'll select Gravity. And again, the gravity icon has an arrow on it, which tells you that it's directional. We need that to point straight down. Okay. You can place that wherever you want it. It doesn't matter. I'm just placing it there so I can see it a little easier. I'll move the particle view over a little bit, and then what I'll do is add a force event to our particle system right here. I'll bring this up and I'll stick it right there below rotation. Okay, so now I need to select that gravity, and you can see that now our particles are they're dropping down pretty fast. Alright, so you could balance this by modifying the gravity in the modify panel, or you can use the influencer right here, the influence percentage, and that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. So I'm just going to drag this down until my particles seem like they're falling right where I want them to on the target. And I think I want them to come down just a little bit. I don't want them, I want to see some stick into the ground and then some bounce off the brick wall. So I think that's pretty good. Now I could change this a little bit by modifying the emitter icon. So I could change the, not width, sorry, the length, and then shift this up, and that way we'd get more falling on the grass. So if I play this, that looks pretty good. Alright, so now I'd like to be able to see those arrows. So right now our shape is a 3D cube. I want to use a shape instance, so I'll select shape instance. I'll drag that up until I see a red line over shape 002, and I'll let go. And that will just override it or replace it. So in the shape instance, I'm going to go ahead and select my arrow. And we do have animation on this arrow, but we do not want to check animated shape right now. We want that animation to only occur once the impact occurs. And then we still can't see our arrow, so we're going to go to display and we're going to change the type to geometry. And then we have quite a mess there. Alright, so how do we fix this? We'll have to look at the rotation event, and then let's change the rotation to speed space follow. And that, now we have arrows that are aligned, but they're aligned in the wrong direction. So let's try adjusting the Y to -90, and that looks a lot better. Excellent. All right, so all of our arrows are impacting at the right spot, and I think it all looks pretty good. They're fairly fast. I like that. So what do we need to do next? We have to create a deflector that allows us to collide with this target. So we could use the target as our deflector, but it's pretty high poly. If we look at this, it's pretty high poly. That's a lot for the deflector to um, try to calculate. So what I want to do is create a proxy deflector. Um, so I will go to create standard primitives, and I'm going to create a cylinder, and I'm just going to align it with this target, and I'll give it a height of 0, and I'm going to right click, convert to editable poly. I'm going to select the top face, hit Control I to invert the selection, and I'm going to delete everything else. So now we have we have a circle that pretty well aligns to the target, but I just need to shift this over just a little bit so that it's a little closer, and maybe down a little bit. Cool. So that looks pretty good. We don't really have to worry about it being angular. For this, it's not really going to matter a lot because we're not going to see this deflector. So I'm just going to label this target deflector. Okay. Awesome. So I think that's going to help a lot. So what I want to do next is actually create a deflector object. So I'll go to my create panel. It's actually a helper. I'll go to space warps, and then I will select deflectors. I'm sorry, it's not a helper, it's a space warp. Sorry about that. And I'm going to select UOmniFlect. And what UOmniFlect is it's a deflector that allows you to select geometry as your deflector. Alright, so if I go into the modify panel, I'll move particle view down. We have an option to pick an object, so I'm going to just go ahead and pick that deflector circle that I just created. And you can see right here, target deflector, perfect. Notice though that our timeline is 200 frames. We had shifted it to 200 frames, so I need to make sure that the deflector time off is also 200 frames. Okay? Alright, that's good. The next thing I want to do is I want to add a collision event. So under shape instance, I'm going to add a collision, and I'm going to change this to stop. I want the arrows to stop when they collide with the deflector, and I'm going to go ahead and select deflectors and add that deflector. Now we're not selecting the circle, we're actually selecting the deflector space warp. So I'll click add, select it, and now you're going to notice that when the arrows hit, they stop. They don't stop in the right direction, but that's okay. Alright, so we're getting there. Alright, the next thing we need to do is now we want to start bringing in our animation. So I will add another shape instance, and I will connect the collision to that shape instance. I'll select the arrow as my shape instance, and then I'll check animated shape. Now that brings the animation into the instance, but what's going to happen is it's going to start immediately when that particle occurs. It's best if you change this to event duration, and then it should collide. So it is colliding, but I forgot to change the display to geometry. So there. Now we can see it, and if you scrub forward, you can see that these arrows are animating as soon as they collide. So that's what we want. So let's take this helper, and we can actually right click, choose object properties, and then let's uncheck cast shadows, receive shadows, renderable, and I'm just going to change this to display as a box. Okay, so that looks great. Alright, so we have a couple more things that we need to do. We have to deal with the arrows that pass through or go by the target. So let's start with the ones that hit the ground here. We are going to add another collision under here. So I'll drag collision up, and for this one we want to select, we'll use this plane down here as our collider, or we could actually, let's use a P omniflect instead. So I'll go to my top view, and I'm going to go to create, and then we'll go to space warps, and I'll select a P omniflect. And with this P omniflect, I want to drag it out so that it's the same size as my ground plane there, the grass. Now again, this is directional, so you see these arrows that are pointing down. Let's flip that up. So now they're pointing straight up. So that's perfect. Alright, so in our collision 2, we can rename these, by the way. We could, on this collision, we'll type collide target. And on this collision, we'll rename it collide ground. Alright, and then we're going to select our P omniflect as our collision. And now these arrows are going to hit, and you notice they're bouncing off. Alright, so we want them to stick, so let's change from bounce to stop, and then let's change, no, that's fine actually, and then let's connect with our event 004. So what it's going to do is our first collision sticks into the target, and we get the animation from event 004. Our second collision sticks into the ground, and then we again get our animation from event 004. So you can see they're sticking, and they're animating, and that looks good. That's exactly what we want. So the only thing we have left is to fix the collisions with the bricks. So we could once again create an P omniflect for the bricks, and I think that's what we'll do. So I'll click P omniflect. I'm going to select auto grid, and I'm just going to drag this deflector over the bricks. Okay, and I'm going to rotate around so that I can position this a little better. Alright, so again, it's directional, it's pointing the wrong direction. Let's rotate that 180 degrees. That looks better. So I will add one more collision. And I'll call this, rename this, right click, rename, collide bricks. And for this one, we don't need to go down here. I could have an animation that breaks the arrow apart, but for this I'm just going to have them bounce off. So I will leave this as bounce, and I will select that P omniflect, and then our arrows will collide and they'll bounce out. That looks pretty good. They are going through when they rotate. They're going through the bricks. So I could fake this just a little bit and move this forward. See if we can. That doesn't look too bad. So we're just basically faking that distance a little bit. And what's neat is because these collisions are colliding with the ground down here, you can see that they're sticking in the opposite way. So that's kind of a neat little effect. So that's about it. It's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple particle flow. We're not doing a lot with this. Um, the one other thing that I'll show you um, is that if you're having problems playing this in the viewport, we can go ahead and cache the file. So I'll drag a cache in under render, and then I'm going to update this, and it should play a little better in the viewport unless you have memory problems. Um, so what I'll do is, just so that we can see how this plays, I'm going to reduce the amount emitted to say 75, and then I'll try this cache again and see if it works. Not quite. Let's try it one more time at 25. Alright. I've been having cache problems, memory problems lately, so it's something I have to go ahead and fix. But now if we play this in the viewport, it should play just about in real time. So it looks pretty good. Alright, so hopefully you were able to follow along. Like I said, we're going to try to provide the file for you. But if we can't, it's not, or if you can't get a hold of it, it's not terribly complicated to create this scene. So as always, let us know if you have any problems. Let us know if there is, if you have any feedback, if there's anything we could have made a little more clear. You can find us again at www.ragdollanimation.com, and I will see you next time.